Reports have come out that the Raptors are now eyeing star prospect Scoot Henderson ahead of this year's NBA draft, so we'll discuss what that means for a potential tank the Toronto Raptors could take for the rest of the season. Additionally, 5 NBA executives were at the Toronto Raptors game last night versus the New York Knicks, scouting out the players ahead of this year's trade deadline. And finally, Raptors fans are forcing ownership's hand with making some sort of changes as attendance has been down for the Toronto Raptors. So we'll discuss all those stories and more in this video. So without further ado, let's jump to the first topic of discussion. The first thing we're taking a look at is the Raptors reportedly eyeing star prospect Scoot Henderson. Now, a lot has been made about potentially tanking away this season given the multitude of losses to, depleted teams, to lower tier teams, to just competition the Raptors we expected to be beating this year. The Raptors have not been sold. At this point in the season, they're 21-27. Yes, they just beat the New York Knicks. Sure, it was an exciting game. Yes, we have a bunch of talent on this roster, but things just haven't been going to plan this year. And a lot of people have been talking about potentially landing the generational potential prospect in Victor Wembanyama, 7'4", Kevin Durant, people are called. I've heard wild names for not the unicorn, the alien Victor Wembanyama, but there's another guy in this year draft that people have been sort of saying would usually be one of those upper echelon prospects, would usually be a number one pick, in most NBA drafts, and that's Scoot Henderson. And reports have come out that the Raptors are not neglecting him in a potential tank, and in fact, they're eyeing him. They have their eyes set on potentially landing this young guard that a lot of Raptors fans are also pretty excited about, as Michael Grange came out in a report saying that decision makers are watching. Raptors president Masai Ujiri has been, to see the presumed number one pick ahead of this upcoming draft. Victor Wembanyama played multiple times. We've discussed this in a previous video, but similarly, the Toronto Raptors have had their eyes on expected second pick, Scoot Henderson, and the other top prospects in what is considered to be a top-heavy draft. They'll be prepared if the season continues careening off course. The question is if they decide to nudge the process along by trading key roster pieces for young players or future draft picks. Now, this is very interesting because we've known Masai Ujiri's out there scouting Victor Wembanyama, and this puts more proof, more validation on that fact. Masai Ujiri's out there getting direct looks, getting good hard looks at that star French generational big man, but he's not the only guy Masai Ujiri's been properly scouting in depth, as Scoot is a player that they're especially eyeing, as well as other top draft players. Now, what does that mean? Would a team that has their eyes set on surely, I'm not saying it's guaranteed we're going to tank, I'm not saying we're for sure going to blow up this roster, but would Masai Ujiri be taking deep, in-depth looks at all these top-tier prospects, left, right, and center, if he wasn't at least considering, wasn't at least contemplating, making this team get that bad by the end of this year's season? No, Masai Ujiri is a GM. He's not incompetent. He's not a dude that's going to be, letting anything go to chance. If we're going to be end up tanking, if we're going to go in that direction, Masai Ujiri is going to ensure that those top guys are players that are worth tanking for. Whether it's, even if we're a bottom four seed, like the 15% chance you get at landing Victor Wembanyama, but also guys like Scoot Henderson and other players at the top of this top-heavy draft. And Scoot Henderson would also be a very nice reward to a losing season. As looking at his stats for the G League Ignite, he's been very, very good. I mean, this season averaging 19 points per game, 5 rebounds, 6 assists. He's a 6'2" guard that's explosive, can drive the lane. He's very athletic. But one question about him that would definitely concern some Toronto Raptors fans is this season he's only shooting 25% from behind the three-point line. So, we've seen what a lack of shooting can do to a team like the Toronto Raptors this year. And Scoot Henderson, if we bring him in to potentially replace a Fred VanVleet, we would be furthering our woes in terms of shooting the basketball. Now, the potential he has, is certainly sky's the limit for a guy like Scoot, and especially a guy like Victor Wembanyama. But, if we were potentially, as the report is saying, specifically eyeing Scoot or hoping we were going to land him, right, we'd have to take into consideration the lack of jump shot. It's not horrible by any means. He can knock him down, but it's not as good as a guy like Fred VanVleet or as polished as a Gary Trent Jr., one of the guards that we currently have as our starters at this point just yet. But, Scoot would be cool. I don't think if we get the first pick, we'd be taking him or eyeing him that much. We'd take him over Victor Wembanyama. I see a couple people on Instagram comments and Reddit potentially say, but he definitely would be a great fit for this team, watching his highlights and doing his things out there. So let me know in the comment section below, do you think the Raptors should end up going out and tanking for Scoot? But the next thing we're taking a look at is 5 teams scouting at the Raptors-Knicks game. Now, a lot was made the other day about how, players were out there. Coaches for league executives from the Orlando Magic were out scouting Fred VanVleet in a recent outing, in a recent performance of the Raptors. But, a lot more NBA executives have their eyes on this Raptors team, as we've covered in pretty well every single video. We have a lot of assets that could potentially be going out for the Toronto Raptors ahead of this year's deadline. And a lot of teams seem to be interested in the potential players they could acquire, if the Raptors do decide to shake things up, which I imagine every single Toronto Raptors fan expects to happen. As a report came out that there are representatives from the Bucks, the Timberwolves, the Pacers, the Clippers, and the Grizzlies here today checking out the Raptors-Knicks game. So Adam's out here saying speculate away. He also went on to comment that the Grizzlies executive, Grumwell, he's there at pretty well every single Toronto Raptors game. So that's fairly interesting, as league executives, rarely are they sending people out to just directly watch games. They have tape of every single team, right? But if a move is to be made, you'll throw some executives. If people are really to make a big deal with a team, right, they'll throw players out there watching. The Knicks are also a squad that are interested in potentially making a few moves ahead of this year's deadline. So I'm sure there's guys on their roster that teams were looking at. But the one team that has had experience with this regarding the Toronto Raptors before is the LA Clippers, who were here mentioned in this list. And as for people that don't know, when we had Kawhi Leonard, they were sending Lawrence Frank, assistant GMs, everyone they could to pretty well every single Toronto Raptors game, trying to recruit guys, trying to get a good feel for Kawhi Leonard is, and they ended up stealing him away from us. So, that's pretty interesting. Obviously, the Clippers are always trying to poach away Toronto Raptors players, but the Pacers are pretty intriguing because obviously Miles Turner's a name that's been linked to the Raptors for a very, very long time. And the Minnesota Timberwolves are a team that is middle of the pack right now. They made an all-in trade last season, for Rudy Gobert, which is still shocking to this point, but maybe they'd be willing to give away, I don't know who, McDaniels or someone to the Toronto Raptors in a potential deal if the Raptors were willing to part ways with an asset to make the Timberwolves sort of win now, because I'd imagine they're in win now mode given all the moves they made this off season. But let me know if any of those teams are really intriguing to you, right? On this list, the Timberwolves, the Pacers, the Clippers, the Grizzlies, and the Bucks, right, for making a potential trade. The Bucks are also a squad that are in a lot of trade rumors trying to add another guard. I've seen a lot of Milwaukee Bucks fans try to make hypothetical trades for Gary Trent Jr. But if you want to bet on where potential Toronto Raptors can end up landing, definitely check out the CoolBet app using the link down in the description below. CoolBet's a sports book regulated in Ontario. They're available all across Canada, and should be your go-to spot if you're ended up betting on Raptors games, betting on NBA games, betting on anything, single really sporting event you want in general, because they got some amazing odds. They got a great team over there if anything gets weird with your sports book or your bets, and they're pretty good to Toronto Raptors fans. They gave us some custom odds ahead of this year's trade deadline, including where Gary Trent Jr., Pascal Siakam, Fred VanVleet, and OG Anunoby will potentially end up. So you want to make the game a bit more exciting, definitely check out the CoolBet app if you're interested in sports betting. If you have another app, definitely switch over. Use the link down below. They're a great sports book. But the next thing we're discussing in this video is Raptors fans forcing ownership's hand. Now, this one was pretty interesting. I think it's been a little bit undersold by Raptors pundits, Raptors media, but in last night's game against the New York Knicks, came out that tonight's game, the Toronto Raptors' 27th home game of the season, is their first non-sellout crowd of the season, according to halftime box score. Capacity is, they're about 600 people under capacity, but that is, sure, you might look at that and say, oh, Ben, that's nothing. That's nothing really happening there. But as a fan of this team, as someone that is a diehard Toronto Raptor, some of these games, especially when we're losing, especially when we're in the middle of the pack, we don't have a direction, right? We don't have young players when they're playing, not with that heart, that soul we're used to seeing from the Toronto Raptors. It can get a little bit ugly. And dare I say it, some of these games can get boring for stretches. I've seen a lot of my friends that are generally big Raptors fans say, I'm not even watching the games at this point right now because the games just aren't that, intriguing, that exciting. And Sure, Bell, Rogers, I went on a rant about it in last night's live stream. I'm recording this right after, but in the live stream against the Knicks about how they have all the money in the world and all that sort of stuff. But the owners, especially Edward Rogers, are notoriously pretty cheap. And if fans are going to stop showing up to the Raptors games, if they're going to stop showing up to Scotiabank Arena to watch this team, then that's a clear indication, because the Raptors rarely sell out. We have one of the best fan bases, best home courts, best just fan base in terms of going out and supporting this team, right? And if we're at a point where fans are just not showing up to the arena, fans are just not watching the games specifically, right? That's going to force ownership's hand to change something, make the team better, or give us some young talent to make us excited again, make Raptors fans watch. Obviously, I'm going to watch every single Raptors game, but I can possibly watch, but most fans, we need something more exciting. And hopefully this drop in attendance, at least for last night's game, is an indication that things need to be changed. They need to be changed fast ahead of this Toronto Raptors trade deadline. But the final thing we're discussing, and it's a big one for the Raptors, is the biggest set stretch of the season is coming up right now. And Blake Murphy put it pretty well, saying that 5, arguably 6 of the Raptors' last 6 losses have been very winnable. Nights like this looks like that means that they're close, but nights like yesterday, and nights like this, he's referring to the Knicks game, nights like yesterday referring to the Boston game, it looks like nothing like it. So I have the beholder, I suppose, but 7 in 12 days out west, so we're going on a big road trip, 7 games in 12 days, will be a true indication in terms of what the Raptors are going to do. And this brutal road stretch, it's happening ahead of this year's trade deadline. I made my opinion known. I expect that Masai Ujiri, Bobby Webster probably have their minds made up in terms of what they want to go, what direction they want to go in with this Raptors team. But, all bets will be sealed following this year's trade deadline. So let me know in the comment section below how you think the Raptors will do on this stretch, how you think they'll do in these games. I'm interested to see how people are feeling about the squad. But you guys are best to make it this far. We're very, very close to 27,000 subscribers. So if you haven't hit that sub button, definitely hit it. But you guys are best. I'm signing out. Cheers.